Well, as many of you are aware, a group of us just returned home from our spring break missions trip to Shaw, Mississippi, where we work with a ministry and a nonprofit called Delta Hands for Hope. They exist to empower children of all ages with education, leadership skills, and abilities to succeed, because like many small towns in rural America, Shaw faces some significant economic obstacles, from scarcity of jobs to low-paying jobs, to a high school that was recently closed because of a roof collapsing. Now all the kids are in one elementary school, overcrowded and underfunded. There's a lot going on in the city of Shaw. One out of every two, we learned this week, 1 out of every 2 children live in poverty, and 1 out of every 3 are food insecure. So Delta Hands for Hope exists to try to make a change in a place that seems like change would take years to do. It's one of the organizations of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship Together for Hope Rural Development Coalition. Say that 5 times fast. But Together for Hope was formed in 2001 to work in the 20 poorest counties in America by 2020. They have succeeded that goal, and so now they've brought in their scope to work within the 301 persistent rural poverty counties in America. And these counties are counties that have a population of 20% or more that have lived in poverty for over 30 years. So we're talking about generational poverty here. So oftentimes when we think about poverty, we think of images of urban centers, but our spring break trip allows us a glimpse into what it's like to be poor in rural Mississippi. Darren and I have taken this trip together many years, the last 5 years together, and one of the things that I love about my job is that I get to work closely with all of our ministers on staff. And so Darren, I consider a dear friend and colleague. But you know, when I drove into Shaw for the first time, it was that moment that I really saw the existence of rural poverty, and it hit me very hard. After a walking tour of the non-existent downtown, I felt that hopelessness that often creeps in these kinds of scenarios. And I asked Jason Coker, where do you even begin to make a difference? So Darren, what was your first impression of Shaw?
Well, the first time that I actually visited Shaw was in 2007. Jason Coker, who was used to be our missions minister here, was leading a trip to Indianola, Mississippi. Jason is actually from Shaw, so he grew up in the Mississippi Delta, so he understands what rural poverty looks like firsthand. But for many of us, it was our first experience with that. So like I said, we were working actually in Indianola, which is a much larger town in the Delta. But Jason took us to Shaw, a little field trip, to see his hometown. And he had arranged it was a town hall meeting they were having that night, because a friend he had graduated high school with was actually the mayor of Shaw then. And so he arranged for our group to go and sit in and listen to this town hall meeting, where they were just kind of getting together and talking about their hopes and visions and plans for their town. And as I sat and listened to the people that had gathered that night, everything they were talking about were the same things that I had hopes and dreams and visions and expectations for my kids, to be able to have enough to eat, to be able to have good health care, to be able to have a school that they could go to have viable after-school options for their kids to be involved in. At the time, 2007, my son Elias had just been born. My daughter Virginia was almost 3. So these were things that were very much in my mind at the time. But what struck me was, as they talked about these things they wanted for their kids, they had no way to see that those things might actually happen. Whereas for me, they were just given, that I would be able to have these opportunities for my kids. So to hear families and parents express the same desires for their children that I have, that all of us have, but then express frustration and almost hopelessness that they didn't think those things could happen for their kids there in that town. And so that night was really when the idea for Delta Hands for Hope kind of was born. And Jason, in talking with the community, said, you know, we are a church that could help. We can do some of these types of things. And like I said, that was 2007. And I left and came back home, and I did not return to Shaw, Mississippi until about 5 years ago. So I came home and did what happens way too many times on trips like this. I came home and I got back to my own life, and I kind of forgot about what was going on there and just started living my own life again. So whenever the opportunity came for us to partner with Delta Hands for Hope, which had become, at this point, a real living ministry and a thing that was happening in town, I was reminded of this meeting that I had sat in on years before, and these promises that I had made to walk alongside these people and make sure these things could happen for them. So the thing that I was struck most by my first time in Shaw was the people.
Yeah, poverty doesn't define Shaw. There's so much richness in its history and its culture. The Blues were born in the Delta. There's just so much there, but the beauty exists within its people. Mm-hmm. So with our involvement since its inception, I have a lot of positive feelings about this partnership of ours. Is there something that you can pinpoint that makes this relationship so special?
I think it's just having gotten to know people and making relationships over the years, particularly with some of the kids who are now not kids anymore. They've graduated high school and have started off going to college, and to be able to just track people. It's a very different way of doing it. The first time we went on this trip, I remember being struck with this idea of this is not we're going to come into town and we're going to pick up some trash and then we're going to leave again. I'd done that once. I'd done that many times, actually, but specifically there one time. And I wanted to change my understanding of what it meant to be in relationship with rural poverty. And so I made this commitment, I'm going to go back year after year and make relationships with people so that when we're going back, it's not that we're going back to help people, but we're going back to see our friends. We're going back to reconnect and, hey, how was your year? What's been going on? And stay connected with people's lives, which is really what has been the draw for me to stay connected with Delta Hands for Hope and the people of Shaw.
One of the youth in particular, Rodarius, graduated last year, or in May, and he stopped by because he heard we were in town. So he stopped by the Cultural Center and just gave us a brief update, and I posted this on my Facebook page this week. But his brief update was, hey, I just want you to know I'm considering going to seminary and to study youth ministry. And I just thought, that's what this is all about. Mm-hmm. The relationships that we're making, the connections that are happening, this is what missions is about. Mm-hmm. So how have you seen the commitment to place change the youth or change you over time?
I think the whole idea of rural poverty is something that whenever you read about it in a magazine or an article or you hear somebody give you statistics, that's the kind of thing that you go, oh, wow, and you think about it for a second, and then it doesn't really have much of an effect after that. But whenever rural poverty isn't just numbers on a sheet, but it's names, it's Rodarius, it's Jafabian, it's Michaela, it's all these people that we've come to make relationships with, it's a lot harder to then just kind of put it out of your mind and get back to your own comfortable life. So the fact that there are names and faces and lives that are connected to those statistics now, that's what's made the change for me. That's what's made this not just a mission trip that we go on, but it is a relationship with people that we consider family now. And the same things that I would want from my family here, the same things that I want from my family there. And so that has really caused a shift in the way that I think about short-term mission trips or any of these types of things. It's not enough to go and just leave, but how do we go and make roots and make connections?
So it's never too late to make your spring break plans. We'll be returning in 2020. Southern Living actually posted an article yesterday about why every Southerner or Texan should visit Cleveland, Mississippi, which is where we stay. So it's a wonderful place, and we should really say thank you to Wilshire for allowing your faithful giving allows us to continue to be present in places like Shaw and to continue to invest in relationships with people like Rodarius. So thank you so much, and we're grateful.